My name is Juan Farah. I'm a member of the society and also the Cuban Philatelic Society, amongst many other. What I'm going to present to you is a small presentation on the special assigned issues that were done by the U.S. administration for Cuba after the Spanish-American War. The stamps are also known as the ALEGORIAS CUBANAS, and they were used from 1899 through, I should say, they were printed from 1899 through 1910. 1910 is when the new issues came out, although the stamps were demonetized in 1913. My presentation will have 4 sections: an introduction. We'll talk about the Bureau of Engraving and Printing issues, which are the Alegorias Cubanas. We'll talk a little about the Republic of Cuba, and then we'll talk about the issues that were printed by the American Banknote Company for Cuba. Presentation starts when the USS Maine anchored in Havana Harbor in January 24th, 1898. The ship came on because of a call from Robert E. Lee's nephew, Fisco Lee. He was kind of the ambassador to Cuba in Havana. He had been concerned that there were some riots that had happened during the island and some property had been burned. And he thought that it'd be, he called the States, or he telegraphed the state. Then a few days later, he went back and texted there was no need to send any ship to Havana because everything was calmed down and he didn't want to upset the Spaniards. Well, the United States by then had already committed to send the Maine to Havana Harbor. The ship entered Havana Harbor on the 24th of January. A few weeks later, we know on February 15th, approximately 9:40 at night, there was a massive explosion on the ship, and that explosion sunk the USS Maine in Havana Harbor. Spain was blamed, and by April, both sides had declared war, and that was the start of the Spanish-American War. Interesting that if the ship had not gone to Havana, there might have never have been a war at the time. And also later on, it was found that the explosion on the ship was actually an inboard explosion. The coal that was used in the ships at the time was very prone to have combustion. And ships that had gone to warm waters had experienced some combustion in the coal. Fortunately for them, it was contained. It was not the case in the Maine. American troops landed in Cuba on June 28, 1898, and by August, a ceasefire had been reached. The ceasefire came about after the defeat of the Spanish fleet of Santiago and the capture of the city. There was a treaty between Spain and the States, and with the Treaty of Paris. And after December 31st, 1898, the whole control of the island was handed over to the States. On December 1898, the United States Post Office placed an ad in the New York Post requesting for some design for some Cuban stamps. They did that because they also realized that the special design issues were not going to be ready on time. So what they did is they took some of the Bureau issues and overprinted them for use in Cuba. The cover that's presented here is a cover bearing the 2-cent stamps. It was canceled by a Spanish chancellor. This date is August 4th, 1898, and it was charged at 2 cents, which is the standard mail. For the United States. And what happened that by order 219 from June 7th, 1898, any mail that was originating from soldiers or armed personnel from the United States, it was going to be based at the same rate as the continental US mail rate. Here we have the US 1895 and 1898 Bureau issues that were overprinted for Cuba. All of them were overprinted with the words Cuba, the value, and then the word the peso. Something that also happened when the United States took over the island, the Spanish currency was no longer valid, so everything was converted to US currency. Similar, the special delivery stamp was overprinted. Special delivery was a brand new service for the island. This was not, special delivery did not exist under the Spanish postal service. Now, the special assigns, there was a criteria set by the post office. The stamps could not bear any person or event in Cuba, if that could not be the subject. The subject had to be a symbolic or allegoric representation of Cuban culture and economy. Henceforth, the word that is known by among Spanish philatelists, ALEGORIAS, which are the Cuban allegories. There were two designs submitted, among many. The two better known are the one by William Curtis. This is what he selected. It says for the five stamps, one of them was going to be the Moral Castle. The other one was going to be a marble statue of La Cubana, a group of royal palms, a tobacco plant, and the portraits of Columbus. The actual designs for the stamps that were done, right, were those by Raymond Smith. Here's a letter from the Treasury Department, dated January 17th, 1899, stating that the dies had now been finalized. And this were the designs that were selected. The statue of Columbus for the 1 cent. We had the group of royal palms was the other selection. The statue of La Cubana, SSS Umbria, which is a Cunard ship, and an oxen-driven plow, which was tilling the ground. As we can see, the marble statue of La Cubana from Curtis was used, royal palms was used, portrait of Columbus was used. In a sense, the tobacco plant might have been implied for this one. The big difference was that Moral Castle was not selected. The other thing that came up was the use of the watermark. Here's another letter from the Treasury from July 5, asking the Postmaster General what type of watermark he would like. And the response came back that what the United States had decided to use was the watermark USC, which stands for United States, Cuba. Now, these are the stamps that were printed. These are the special designs issues for Cuba. What's interesting, these are the only stamps ever printed by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing with the name of a foreign country. They were officially placed in circulation by order number 59, dated August 5, 1899, and they were placed on sale on September 1st, 1899. Here is a copy of the order, and it was signed by E.G. Lawton, which was the Director General of the Post for Cuba. So here we have the five, the 6 designs for the stamps, and we'll go over each of them individually and show where the designs originated from. So the first one is based on a statue of Christopher Columbus. The original statue is in the interior, was at the time of the interior gardens of El Palacio de los Capitanes, or the captain's, basically the captain's palace or the governor palace. And it was across the Parque del Ayuntamiento. Here is the statue. Here's a copy. Here's a blown-up photograph of the statue, and as you can see, it is identical to the design that was used for the 1 cent stamp. Here's a die proof of the 1 cent stamp. Next, we have the royal palm. You know, this is royal palm was the most abundant, one of the most abundant trees in Cuba at the time. It is considered Cuba's national tree and is included in the national crest of Cuba. So here's a period postcard of the time. It shows a, you know, group of palms, and this is kind of where the design for the 2 cent came in. It represents Cuba National Street. Again, an allegory of the island. Next, we have the Statue La Noble Habana. It is in sense, it's a statue done by Giuseppe Ganini. The statue, what it is an Indian maiden. Originally, and this is an engraving, this is a copy of an engraving from a block engraving from the period, from the 18, no, this is probably 1850s, 1860s. And at the time, the statue resided in the Nuevo Prado, which was across the old Campo de Marte Park. The park this park no longer exists. It is now across from the Capitol in Havana. The 5-cent stamp, it was symbolized commerce. It was based on the SSS Umbria from the Cunard line. Right. Here's a postcard from the 1890s, and this is what the Cunard, the Umbria looked like. And so here you have a picture at a different angle. You can see the mast from the ship and the stacks. This was Umbria was one of the last steamships that was fitted with sails. The 10 cents is, I'm sorry, I had the wrong title here. I forgot to update this one. It's a farmer employed in a field. In the background, we either have a tobacco or a sugar storage building, not a sugar plantation. It could symbolize Cuba's sugar, which is a skin crop, or also tobacco, but it was just a pair of oxens plowing the land. Last is a stamp that some people don't consider part of the Alegorias Cubanas, but if you look closer at the stamp, this is a die proof of the 10 cents. There are a couple of symbols that are, you know, traditional of Cuba. One, we have a tinajones. These are very large terracotta pots. They were very common in rural Cuba, and they're used both as a storage for liquids and gardens decoration. Here's again a photograph, a postcard showing the tinajones, and it also had the royal palm fronds on both sides. It was interesting that the gentleman in the bicycle, it's what gave the name El Mensajerito among Cuban philatelists, you know, the little messenger. This stamp, the original entrega inmediata or special delivery issue for Cuba, had one interesting mistake. When the word immediate was translated, instead of using the correct Spanish translation of IN, they used the words IMN, inmediata. So the original copy has an error. The error was discovered, but by then 150,000 copies have been printed, and they decided not to reissue, not to print new copies until those had been exhausted. Now, the Alegorias Cubanas were issued in sheets of 100. They were originally printed in sheets of 200. If you ever have a chance and go to Washington, D.C., if you go to the Postal Museum, you can go to their library, and they do have prints of all the original sheets of 200, and those shows the day they were first put into place, and they're signed by the Postmaster General. So this one's were issued in sheets of 100, said originally printed in sheets of I think 200, and they were cut in half. And they had plate numbers and imprint at the top and at the bottom. The 1 cent, 2 cent, 3 cents, and 5 cents, each of them had 5 different plates involved. For the 10 cent, there was, for the 10 cents and the special delivery, only 1 plate was used. Another that was interesting for Cuba was that when the post office came in, they introduced booklet panes that didn't exist before. This is a copy. It's in my collection. This is the original, the US issue booklet pane. This is a fairly rare item. And what's even rarer is to have the actual booklet pane covers. They were issued in 2 quantities. One booklet of 25 cents, which had 2 panes of 6 stamps, and another one for 49 cents, which was 4 panes of 6 stamps. What was customary at the time, and I think it was customary even maybe beginning of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, is that you pay an additional penny for the convenience of getting the stamps on a booklet. Here we have some uses of the stamps. There are 2. One of them is the internal mail, local mail. This is a letter sent from Havana in 1899 to Pinar del Rio. This one is another one from also from Havana, sent to Pisagua, Chile. Pisagua is any letters from Cuba going to South and Central America and even parts of the Caribbean are not very common in the early years. Most correspondence was done to Cuba, Italy, France, Spain, and the United States. So going to Chile, even though it's closer than, they're kind of scarce. There's not many of them. The next 2, it's an illustrated cover, again, from Havana to New York. And this one shows the rate, the civilian rate for letters going from Cuba to the state. The next one is a letter showing the same rate, the rate, the military rate going from Havana to Cuba to the States. There's a 2 cent stamp. That's from Marianao. The writing here is kind of, can't see it too much, but what it essentially says is soldier letter. It signs by E.H. Humphrey, 2nd Lieutenant of the Cavalry, and it shows Quemados, Cuba. Any letter, in order for a letter to be sent and pay the 2 cents rate, the same rate as the United States, had to be signed by a chaplain, an officer, or a member from the supply store. If either one of those 3 persons did not co-sign the letter when it was received, it would have been taxed as postage due. Here we have a certified letter going to Germany. This is a triple rate letter for 1.5 ounces. At the time, after April 1st, 1901, the registration fee had gone from 10 cents down to 8 cents. And so it was 8 cents plus 5 cents per half ounce. Here we have another use of the Alegorias Cubanas, in this case, as a postage due stamps. This is a letter that came from the States, and it went to Santiago de Cuba. When the letter left the New York office, it was had 2 letters, had a stamp with the letter T, and then shows 15 centimes, and the top shows 6, which meant 6 cents due. By the convention of the UPU, was that any letter that went to, any overseas letter had to be charged at twice the deficiency. Turns out that a centime is the same thing, 5 centimes was the same thing as 1 cent. So this shows that the letter was short, was short 3 cents, and you paid twice the rate. This cover is an interesting cover. With this cover, I was able to establish that the actual issue date of the entrega inmediata was September 1st of 1899. A lot of the catalogs available, and still some of them show, they show that some of them show it as late as December of the following year. The one that had it closer was October 1st, 1899. But this cover was posted on September 21st, 1899. Now, actually, it went to Germany, and there was no special delivery service with Germany at the time. So this is a kind of, in a sense, a partial philatelic cover because of that. The other things that I found in the research that first, the April 1899, United States Post Office placed the order for the stamps. In August of 1899, they were put to press. In August 19 and September 26 of 1899, shipments were sent to Cuba. Order 59, which we had seen earlier, established September 1st as the date to place at the post office the ALEGORIAS CUBANAS. Also, there was an article from the September 9, 1899 from the Metropolitan Philatelists stating that the stamps, including the entrega inmediata, have been released for sale in Cuba. An article in the 12th Philatelic Congress said the same thing. And then we have a cover dated September 21st, 1899. I think with this, there's no doubt that the stamp was put in place by then. This is also the earliest known date of usage for the stamp. Here's the letter dated August 19, 1899, stating that the new Cuban stamps, including the entrega inmediata, special delivery stamps, were mailed today to Cuba. You can say, I have the honor to report that they have been mailed today, an account for your order, Director of Post in Havana. And here they mention all the stamps, the 1 cent, 2 cent, 5 cents, 10 cents, and the special delivery issue. So that concludes the section on the U.S. issues. Now we move into when Cuba became a republic and the use of the stamps. This are, sorry. Let me see how I, oh, here we go. These are two photographs. This is a picture when they raised the Cuba over the governor's palace. This was done at noon on May 20th. And this is a ceremony that was held later that day. Here we have the picture of Tomás Estrada Palma, which was Cuba's first president, Máximo Gómez, the leader of the Cuban army during the revolution, and Leonard Wood, just the administrator for the island of Cuba. This represents the first stamp that was printed by the Cuban Post Office. It was an overprinted stamp. The reason this had to be overprinted was that they had run out of the 1 cent stamp. And at the time, one of the newspapers ran a postcard correspondence, not a postcard correspondence, but a postcard competition, encouraging people to mail postcards to their friends. So very quickly, the 1 cent stamp ran out. And what they decided to do was to take the 3 cent stamp, which was the stamp less used at the time, and overprinted 1 centavo. Okay, so here you have that issue of the stamps. There are a lot of varieties of the stamps, and you have to be very careful with them, because what happened was that they realized there was some value in the stamps, and after the stamps were no longer available, someone took sheets of the stamps and they were able to get a hold of the original die and started printing many stamps. The stamps they printed were titled, forgeries. And the way they did them, they printed them sideways, missing in one stamp. The one stamp was missing, you had it on the next side. And unfortunately, the way to tell is you have to look at the color of the overprint. Color overprint is like a red, very similar to that, if I pronounce it correctly, mercurochrome, the thing you use when you have a wound. Here's the first day cover for the issue. It was first available September 30th, and it was available September 30, October, September 30, and for 3 days. After 3 days, the other stamps came in, and they had also run out of the issue. On November 21st, the original special deliveries were running short, so now the corrected copy was put to press, and they were put for sale on starting on September 21st, 1902. The difference between the two stamps is that this one has inmediata instead of IMM, has INM. Here we have covers that were used during the by the Republic. Cuba kept using this stamps for quite a period of time. Right, the original one. Here's a registered letter from Guanabacoa to Roque, very small cities. And here's a letter from Puerto Prince, which is Camagüey, to Beirut, Lebanon. This is this is a very uncommon destination at the time. Now, after the island was free, they started negotiation with the Bureau of Engraving and Printing to obtain the dies so that the Cuba can start printing the stamps themselves instead of keep getting it from the government. In 1904, Gonzalo de Quesada, just the Cuba Special Commission to the United States, closed a deal with the Bureau of Engraving and Printing to acquire the dies for all 6 Alegorias. They also committed to buy all the stamps that had been printed and continue by order the stamps from the States until the new printer was able to start printing the stamps. What the Bureau of Engraving did before releasing the stamps, they were concerned that it's very hard to distinguish between the Bureau stamps and the ones printed by the Republic of Cuba just by looking at the stamps. So they added some marks to the dies. The markings they did to the die, we'll go over them in a while. They never divulged what those marks, what those changes had been, either to the Cuban government or to the American banknote company. For those reasons, those changes are known as the secret marks. Now, when the American banknote printed the stamps, and these are die proofs of the stamps by the American banknote company, there's very few of this one exists, only 6 stamps, only 5 of the 6 stamps, only the 1 cent, 2 cent, 3 cent, 5 cent, and 10 cent stamps were put, well, the 3 cent stamp was never put. Only the 1, 2, 5, and 10 cent stamp and the special delivery stamps were put to press. The 3 cent stamp was never issued. The special delivery stamp printed by the Bureau, which was done by the American Banknote Company, never went into production either. So what are the secret marks that were done by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing? Here we have the original Bureau of Engraving and Printing stamps, where it was easier to see. It's here in the cartouche where the value is. You can see in the original Bureau stamps, it is straight. This was the changes that the American Banknote Company did. Now the secret mark, and for that you need a magnifying glass, is that in this part of the stamp, right here in the corner, the edges, what the bureau did, they put a mark that essentially cuts the framing of the stamps. In the 2-cent stamp, what the bureau did is there's a circle in both stamps where all the markings were not there. They kind of removed some lines from there, but I don't have it here, but I've done some other research, and I think there's actually a totally different secret mark that is not this one on the 2 cents. Now, the changes that you can easily tell to differentiate one from the other one, in the original stamp, there are leaves on each side of, all around the 2 cents figure, the value. Those leaves were removed by the American Banknote Company. In the 5-cent stamps, the secret marks done by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, if you look at the trident on the original stamps, basically all 3 tridents have the same length. What the Bureau did is that the center trident was now extended, so now it's longer than the other 2 forks in the trident. Okay, yeah, if you look at them, you can see here, this one is, they're all the same, but if you look at this one, the center one, it is larger if you're able to get the 2 stamps together. The easiest way to differentiate the US from the Cuban stamp is the American Banknote Company added a small caret on each side of the cartouche that holds the word Cuba. Okay. Here we have the original 10-cent stamp and the one that was done by the Bureau, by the American Banknote Company. The secret mark that was done by the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, they took the plow and they kind of put a line, basically breaking the plow into 2 parts. Again, you'll need a magnifying glass to be able to detect that. Now, the differences between the Bureau of Engraving and the marks done by the American Banknote Company. American Banknote Company, all they did was they put a little dot on each side of the ornament that contains the word Cuba, or the cartouche having the word Cuba. So there's a little dot on each side of this. That's the easiest way to detect the 2 of them. Now, what are the differences between the on-issue 3-cent stamps and the special and the entrega inmediata stamp? Again, the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, what they did the same thing they did in the 1 cent. If you look at, this is a blow of the value of the Bureau of Engraving. There's no line here. They did the same thing they did in the 1 cent. They put a line breaking that up. What the American Banknote did, here's the scroll on the Bureau issue. The American Banknote Company took that scroll out. Now again, this stamp was never issued. On the 10 cents, one of the markings the Bureau did, they added a small leaf here on the side. What they also did, and I said it's not here, I'm writing an article on it, is that there were additional shadow lines added on the column. The changes the American Banknote Company did, they added 4 large carats on each side of the cartouche that holds what the stamp is for. Okay, so this is why they added 2 on this side and 2 on the other side. Again, this stamp was never issued. All that you have are die proofs, and there's only about maybe 5 die proofs that are known for either one of the 2 stamps. Here we have the issue stamps. They were not issued at the same time. They were issued between June 1905 and November 1907. The reason for that is that there was a lot of the Bureau stamps. There was a very large stock still available. Cuba in 1904, right after they had bought the dies, they bought the remaining stocks of the stamps. So the first one that was printed was the 2 cents because that was the most widely used stamp. That was used for mail, domestic letter mails between the island, and also back in 1901, the mail rate between letters between Cuba and the United States was one of the same, so it was also used for correspondence to the United States. Next one, they did the 1 cent, because the 1 cent was used for postcards and also for printed matter. One thing I didn't say, but it's very interesting, if you look at all the stamps that were printed at the beginning of the 20th century, early part of the 20th century and 18th century, the stamps, all the stamps had 3 colors in common. They had green, red, and blue. Green was the UPU color used for postcards mailed within the country of origin or for printed matter rate. 2 cents was domestic mail and foreign postcards. And therefore that was red was the color for that. And blue was chosen as the color for overseas letters. Cuba also issued a booklet, the same booklet that was issued by the States, but they illustrated the cover. And for everything, every place that I've looked, this looks to be, from what I can tell, the first illustrated booklet paint cover in the world. Nobody had illustrated at the time. Before, it was just a blank piece that said the value of the stamp, but here we actually illustrated a cover. On the front, it had an effigy of a lady, and most countries at the time used a woman as the effigy of the nation. And in the back, you have El Castillo de Morro, or the Morro Castle. The price was the same thing as the United States. You had 24 cents worth of stamps, but you paid an extra penny. Here are some correspondences on the use of postcard. Here's a letter from Columbia Barracks. After 1905, Cuba beat everybody, and the guys that were running for president called that the election was fraudulent. So the United States intervened to prevent a civil war in the country. So that's the United States took over for basically 3 years again. Here's a postcard to Japan, and this is probably not true, but it went to Kobe. Maybe the Japanese were very impressed with Cuban cattle, and that's what Kobe beef started. Here we have 2 other letters. This one is actually using the new 5 cents value of the stamps, and it's registered or certified letter from Jaguaramas in Santa Clara. Jaguaramas population is less than 1,000. And here's a letter going outside the United States, paying the 8 cent registry fee and the 2 cents regular letter rate from Cuba to the United States. The stamp is canceled by a colonial straight line canceller, and it has the certified letter canceller in it. Again, we have the use of the stamps as postage due. The use of the stamp as postage due came about because Cuba didn't have postage due stamp at the time. The postage dues that were available were the ones that were overprinted by the U.S. government, by the U.S. administration. Over time, those stamps started to have less and less of them. So here you have a letter from Canada paying 2 cents when it should have been, should have had 5 cents. So they took a 1 cent stamp and a 5 cents postage due stamp to make up the 6 cents difference. And it's the same thing here, a letter from England where they put the one penny, one British penny at the time was worth 2 cents US or 2 cents Cuba, and here we have the same thing. And this is the kind of the conclusion of the exhibit. These are the stamps that were printed in 1910. And these were the replacement stamps for the Alegorias Cubana. Here we have a cover which bears both the Alegorias Cubana, the new stamps, and interesting enough, is using a revenue stamp to pay the total postage from Cuba to France, 8 cents for registration, plus 5 cents, made it 13 cents. This letter should not have basically gone through the mail, but somehow it made it. So with that, I conclude my presentation.